why don't we get started? We'll just do a little bit of the next section.
Okay.
It would be good to start since it's likely to. Um,
I am.
I mean, it's only a few verses, but they're. This is one of my. Uh, um, I mean, I have many favorite parts in Hebrews, but this is really one of them, and I think one of the most most brilliant. Um, so I've always really liked it. So it's verse chapter 12, verse 18.
Mhm.
For you have not come to what may be touched, a blazing fire and darkness and gloom and a tempest and the sound of a trumpet and a voice whose words made the hearers entreat that no further messages be spoken to them. For they could not endure the order that was given. If even a beast touches the mountain, it shall be stoned. Indeed, so terrifying was the sight that Moses said, I tremble with fear. But you have come to Mount Zion and to the city of the living God, the heavenly Jerusalem, and to innumerable angels in festal gathering, and to the assembly of the firstborn. So notice the assembly of the firstborn who are enrolled in heaven, and to a judge who is God of all, and to the spirits of just men made perfect, and to Jesus, the mediator of a new covenant, and to the sprinkled blood that speaks more graciously than the blood of Abel. How is this section related to previous sections, the previous section, and possibly sections before that? It begins with for, where you have not come to what may be touched.
Has the covenant already been formed between God and Moses? The old covenant? Or was that
Not
way before?
not for Esau. Esau was under the Abrahamic covenant, but
Abrahamic. So Moses was the new covenant.
Moses is the old covenant,
Yeah, Moses is the old covenant and
the Mosaic covenant,
the Mosaic
law.
covenant, right. So
Right.
I guess he's leading into the new covenant of Jesus.
And so here this is a comparison of covenants.
Yeah.
And so it's linked back to uh, no one be immoral or irreligious like Esau
Yeah.
for, and now he's going to sort of offer up. So Esau had rejected the covenant
Yeah.
that he was part of. And now he's going to compare at a high level the old and the new covenants in a
Yeah.
very kind of poetic and graphic way. And so what he's saying is so the covenant binds man, a covenant with God binds man with God.
Mhm.
The old
And
covenant is fearsome, stern, terrifying, expressed by Mount Sinai. And the new covenant is joyous, as expressed by Mount Zion. Esau had rejected the right of the firstborn, and now we see the assembly of firstborn in the new covenant. So he begins with Mount Sinai, which is, uh, first of all, contrasts with Mount Zion, but it's also a warning of what awaits those who are unfaithful to the new covenant. So, so what's interesting here, he says, um, for you have not come to what may be touched, a blazing fire and darkness and gloom and a tempest, the sound of a trumpet, and a voice whose words made the hearers entreat that no further messages be spoken to them. For they could not endure the order that was given. If even a beast touches the mountain, it shall be stoned. Indeed, so terrifying was the sight that Moses said, I tremble with fear. So he's describing Mount Sinai, and the sort of striking thing is that Mount Sinai is not mentioned, and mountain is mentioned 4 times in the Old Testament, but only with the beast touching the mountain here. And God is never mentioned. Yahweh is mentioned 6 times in Deuteronomy. So how come the author doesn't mention Sinai, largely doesn't mention mountain?
Is it because he wants to focus on Zion, on the new covenant?
No, here it's because he's sort of focusing on the old covenant.
He focuses on the, but doesn't that prepare us for the coming of the new covenant? No?
Well, it does, but his major interest isn't, sort of to show the continuity or the way in which the old covenant gave birth to the new. It's to show the contrast between them.
Oh, so if you go back, you're going
Right.
back.
And it's also giving an explanation as to why Moses was trembling with fear.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, so he doesn't, I mean, this is clearly drawn from the account of the giving of the Mosaic law, but he doesn't make that explicit because he's offering a high level view that allows us to look at the covenant as a whole, taking the one event, the making of the covenant, as representative of the covenant as a whole. And he doesn't, so doesn't he mention God? God is mentioned nowhere in his account. And we see in his account of Mount Zion, to the city of the living God, a judge who is God of all, Jesus, mediator of a new covenant, and who sprinkled blood, whatever. So God is very much present in Mount Zion and the new covenant. But why not in the old?
Well, it sounds like the opposite of what we know God is. God is love. And the description there is all of punitive and penalties and God being, and so unapproachable.
Unapproachable. There's an enormous chasm, enormous distance that separates God from man. That distance is so great. It says in the second part of verse 19, and a voice whose words made the hearers entreat that no further messages be spoken to them. Whose voice is it? The author doesn't identify the voice.
Mm-mm.
It's presumably God's, maybe it's the voice of an angel. But the point is that it's a voice. It's not a voice that you want to hear, but it's a voice. So the voice, whose voice it is vague. There's a sharp separation between man and God. So much so that he says that even Moses, who saw God face to face, trembled. There's no vision on the part of the Israelites of God. They don't see him, but they're overwhelmed by the violent effects of his presence. And then also Albert Van Hoy, who is one of the prominent um, scholars of Hebrews, argued that the author wants to create the impression that God was not unambiguously present at Sinai. So the entire event of the making of the covenant, which then symbolizes the old covenant as a whole, is murky and terrifying. And then also, in terms of the original Greek, there are no articles used in this description of Mount Sinai or the mountain. So the mountain is always a place of revelation, right? That's what the mountain is. Moses goes up to the mountain to hear God speak to him. Jesus goes up to the mountain and delivers the Sermon on the Mount. He doesn't need mediation. God doesn't have to speak and then Jesus come down. But so the mountain, um, Elijah and the mountain were, the still small voice. Mountains are always a place of revelation, but here that revelation is very ambiguous. The only thing is that it's sensorily frightening. And it's difficult to detect God's presence other than through these terrifying signs. And the other thing, in terms of the original Greek, there being no articles, that's in terms of classical Greek drama, that's a characteristic of a tragedy. So the author is almost certainly trying to present this, in terms of literary flourish as a tragedy, which people are thinking of going back to. So I think with that, we should stop. We'll continue with going through the seven phrases that he uses to describe the encounter at Sinai.